There's two versions of this exercise. One is a strict bent over row, and the other demonstration is a heaving bent over row. There is another variation of this exercise called a super training row, which will be in another video, and I'll explain the differences between this and that. To be able to bent over row, you have to be able to deadlift, you have to be able to do a Romanian deadlift, and you have to be able to control your shoulder blades in such a way that allows you to pull correctly or to row correctly. If you can do all three of those things, then you can consider bent over row to be a really good exercise to include within your training. So you deadlift the weight up as you normally would deadlift. You try and get your shoulders stacked over your feet. You try and have your weight evenly distributed through the inside, the outside, and the heel of your foot. And then you stand the weight up, making sure that you don't round your back. You don't lose your weight going forward. The weight stays even across your feet. You move your knees back just enough so that the bar can get past your knees, and then you stand up with it. If you want to know more information about the deadlift, I suggest you watch the deadlift video. And then you perform the hinge component of a Romanian deadlift. So this is, you put a softness into your knees, and then you continue to bend at the hip until just shy of when you would feel some hamstring tension. The more horizontal you can get, technically the more difficult it's going to be to row the weight, because you're actually lifting the weight vertically against gravity. If you have to include any lateral movement, so if you're moving it towards your hips a lot, it's going to make the movement a little bit easier. So if you can get into this sort of position where you're just shy of flat, as long as you haven't got a horrendous amount of hamstring tension in this position, then that's absolutely fine, because you don't want your rowing strength to be limited by the discomfort that you're feeling in your hamstrings. At the end of the day, this is a back training exercise, so your legs shouldn't be the limiting factor. Once you're in that position, to make sure that you don't look like a little bit of a T-Rex, which you will see sometimes for people who have like a bent wrist situation, you want to think about pulling with your elbows rather than thinking about pulling with your hands. So imagine there's a little puppet master and he has control of all of your limbs with a different string, and he is pulling on your elbow string. He's not pulling on your hand string, and as a result of that, you're more likely to get a bit of a natural kind of arc in this movement, so it's going to kind of curve outwards and then curve up towards your back, and as a result of that as well, the bar will move from slightly this direction towards your toes, and it will move slightly back towards your hips. That's a natural movement that will happen as a result of a good rowing position. In a nutshell though, aim for rowing from below your shoulders to your belly button, and you'll probably be most of the way there. If you still have the really bad T-Rex arm situation, if you think about pulling your elbows out just a little bit and not pulling them so close down your body, that can also help. The second version, which is called a heaving bent over row, is you're effectively using your hips or your legs to gain a little bit of momentum on the bar, which will just allow you to lift a little bit more weight. And if we think about this from a muscle building perspective, it's not hugely effective because it doesn't have a really good stretch sensation with the lats, and it doesn't have a really good squeeze situation with the lats either. However, it does allow for an increase in load efficiently, so therefore it's probably more classed as a strength exercise. And you can see I'm just using my hip musculature. I'm getting a bit of momentum early on in the lift to allow me to be able to lift more weight, basically. The reason that in this demonstration I am not using my knees very much to get that extra bit of momentum is because that would technically be closer to what's called a super training row, where you almost perform like a mini normal deadlift to initiate the speed increase at the start of the lift, whereas in this version you're using kind of more of like a Romanian deadlift to gather a bit of extra momentum. But the principles are still the same. You're still trying to row towards your belly button. You're still trying to keep your head neutral. You're trying to stay balanced so that you can just concentrate on the movement that you're supposed to be doing. And the same situation arises that if you feel you're a bit too T-Rex arm, bent at the wrist, then just think about flaring your elbows out just a smidge.